Dr. Amber Rose.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome. On Tuesday, June 23rd, 1993, I was sitting in my own backyard, and I looked up to the heavens and I asked for a sign. I was feeling kind of lost. I didn't know what to do with the rest of my life. A few minutes later, I decided to look in the Washington Post to see if I could find a part-time job. So I retrieved 3 newspapers, and they were in my recycling bin because I'd never opened them. I just threw them in there. I looked at Sunday and Monday's want ads, and I circled a few items, and I made a few calls. But it was nothing special, really. But on Tuesday, the actual day that I was living in, on that Tuesday, the 23rd of June, I never made it to the want ad section. What happened was I opened the newspaper and I made it to the style section. In other words, it just opened and there was a style section looking right at me. It was as if the article had been written just for me, you know? But what happened was I saw a photo of a man, and he was carrying his wife in his arms. And it looked like she was either dead or dying. And I started to cry. And I said, whatever this is the next thing I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I knew it was something special. I had no idea what it was. And I had not read even the title of the article yet. I just saw the picture, and I was so moved that I thought, this is it. The title of the article was called Hope Stings Eternal. Not hope springs eternal, but hope stings eternal. So it was all about honeybees. It was then that I realized that I was sitting in a lawn chair in my backyard, and basically I noticed there were honeybees on the clover all around me, and they had been there all along, but I wasn't looking. So what I'm trying to say is that the answer to my prayers was right in my own backyard. And that's a very important concept. And those of you who work with bees, they're really God's little doctors. They're miracles. And all the honeybee products, not just, I'll be talking about the Venom, but all of the honeybee products are very special. It was then, after I saw the honeybees in my clover, I remember that someone had told me that she was stinging herself for MS, or that somebody was teaching her how to do it. But, at the time she told me, it went in one ear and out the other, right? Because I didn't have MS. So, and I wasn't treating anybody with MS at that time. And so it was like, it was someone else's story, but I didn't connect with it. I just heard it, and it went in one ear and out the other. But after I read the article, all of a sudden, I remembered the story of that woman who was being stung by bees. And I called her up, and I said, Jennifer, is this article in the Washington Post, is this about the lady who's stinging you? She said, yes. And I said, wow. I said, when are you going back? She said, tomorrow. I said, can I come? And she said, absolutely. So the very next day, on June 24th, 1993, I went in a car with Jennifer and her husband, and I thought I was going to teach them all about acupuncture, you know, and they could sting in the acupuncture points, and that would be really interesting. And I got there and I realized I had so much to learn. Like, they had so much to teach me. So, but I decided that I was going to get a testing and try it out, because I'm not going to do anything with other people if I haven't tried it myself. It has to work on me, otherwise I don't tell people about it. So I got my testing on my knee. Now, in general, I don't do testings on the knee anymore. But at that time, 23 years ago, that's where they did them, because they thought you want to do it as far away from the heart as you can get, but not go too far down on the extremity or it'll swell too much. So, a man named Mickey had a bee on a tweezer, and he stung me on my knee without ice, and I'm the biggest baby. I use ice all the time, but at that time I didn't know any better, and so he stung me, and he took his wristwatch and he laid it right on my knee, and he said, if you're not dead in 20 minutes, you can have a few more. Well, obviously I lived to tell the tale. Oops. Stop. I did not die, and so I chose to receive 2 more stings for a bladder infection that was unresponsive to 3 months' worth of antibiotics. I left that free clinic, and the operative word is free, because I've never charged for bees, and the person I learned from never charged. It was all just donations. I left on a real high. In other words, I was drunk on bee venom. And I don't mean just I fell in love with bee venom. I literally had such a sense of well-being that it was like a real, natural high. So it is possible. Someone once asked me on a radio show, can you get drunk on bee venom? I said, definitely, you really can. So about 5 hours later, after I was stung, I went to the library where I lived, and I was checking out some books on honeybees. Wanted to learn as much as I could. And I was standing in line, and all of a sudden I felt faint. I thought I was going to pass out. And I thought, should I tell the person in front of me or the person behind me that I was stung by bees this morning, and to tell that to the EMTs when they come? But by the time I had that thought process in my mind, the feeling went away. So it kind of came, and then it just sort of passed away. So I checked out my books, and I walked to the parking lot, and as I left the library, I realized that all of my bladder symptoms were completely gone. Now, I'm getting the chills, that was the beginning of my first real personal experience with honeybees. Not that I haven't worked with bees before, but in terms of personally being stung on purpose, and for something that I'd had for, 3 months is definitely considered chronic. So you'll see I only like to sting chronic conditions. But I looked at my watch. Now you would think, why would somebody look at their watch if they just, got stung by bees and they had a little personal miracle happen? Well, in Chinese medicine, since I'm an acupuncturist, there's a time of day for every organ, every meridian and pathway. And when I looked at my watch, we had just entered the time of the bladder. And so, again, I'm getting the chills, because I'm remembering a story that moved me so much that 23 years later, I'm still doing this. I'm still teaching people about it. It's a passion. It's something I love. But to me, it was a real miracle, and I thought, and this is a little embarrassing to admit, but I thought I made it up that the idea of combining acupuncture with bee stings, because bee venom therapy or bee sting therapy, some people called it at that time, was its own entity, I thought. It was a totally separate thing, and acupuncture was something I went to school for and I studied, and I was a practicing acupuncturist. But by combining the two, I called it bee acupuncture, and I thought I made it up. And basically what happened was I discovered when I went to China that they've been doing this for 3,000 to 5,000 years, and I did not make it up. And basically, maybe I was tapping into the collective unconscious or something, but it just seemed to me that they went together, especially because I had the bladder problems, and it went away at the bladder time of day. So to me, when someone has a problem all the time, the same problem at the same time of day, it doesn't matter whether it's a headache or bladder problems or they can't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, it means something in Chinese medicine. That's why I looked at my watch. Because, normally most people wouldn't look at their watch just because the symptom went away. I was looking because I wanted to see what time of day it was in the Chinese clock. So I wondered really if you stung in acupuncture points, if it would be more powerful than stinging randomly, just any place, or some people sting just where it hurts. So the question was really, something I had to think about, and I was very curious. So be careful what you wish for, right? Because on June 23rd, 1993, I asked for a sign. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was ready to start a whole new chapter. And I ended up getting a full-time job and finding my life's work. And I was looking for a part-time job. But I guess I wasn't that clear when it was just in my mind. But when I actually looked up to the heavens and asked for a sign, I was actually, thinking about something I really wanted to spend my life doing that would make a difference in the world. So what I hope right now is that your ears and your hearts are open, and that my words don't go in one ear and out the other, or I don't want my words to get thrown into a recycling bin like I threw those newspapers into the recycling bin because I just didn't feel like reading them. I hadn't ordered the paper, I just moved to that house, so I hadn't ordered the paper, and so I had a recycling bin, and I just, every day when I walked my dog, I just threw the papers in there. So now we move on. That was supposed to be the introduction to myself, but it's really my story of how I got involved. There's a ride in Disney World where a doctor is shrunk to a microscopic level and injected into the bloodstream of a patient. And that way you can heal the patient from the inside out. Fortunately, we don't have to wait for medical science to catch up with Disney World. We each have an inner physician, which is our immune system, and if it has gone to sleep, like Rip Van Winkle, then we have a chronic condition because the body's not healing itself like it normally would if the immune system were awake. So we need to say to that physician inside us, our immune system, inner physician, heal thyself. We're manipulating the body to heal itself, and it's a magic trick. And now, I didn't know I was going to be holding a microphone, so I have some little things over here I can grab it. Okay. So, since we're talking about magic tricks and trips, because this was quite a trip that I've been on, and you're basically joining me on my trip. So this is a magic hat, and if I were a magician, I would just reach inside. Let's see, with one hand, not so easy. Let's see if I can do it this way. Let's see, oh, I think I have it upside down.
Your lovely assistant will hold the hat.
No, that's okay. All right, so be careful of the camera. Okay, so I'm gonna pull a rabbit out of a hat, right? Here I am, pulling the rabbit out of the hat. Normally I would do this with two hands. So obviously you can see it's not that easy to pull a rabbit out of a hat. But when I talk about this, and I use this metaphor, is that I'm sitting up here, and you guys are all there, and it looks like, oh, it's so easy, and she's been doing this a while, but it's like she obviously loves what she does, and it's just an easy thing. But I mean, even me being down here, I mean, I'm sacrificing something too. It's my nephew's wedding, and I'm missing it, to be here. But my son loaned me back because I gave this to him, because we used to joke about pulling a rabbit out of a hat, because it's kind of like a surprise. But the truth is that, first of all, when you're a magician, or when you're not, you actually have to put the hat there first. Then later, you put the rabbit in it. And at some point in time, let's say tonight is one of those times, that I get to just pull the rabbit out of the hat, you see. And it looks like, it's just so easy. But what we're looking at here is 23 years of doing the same thing over and over again, of teaching people how to sting themselves with honeybees to get well. So this is a 23-year-old rabbit and a 23-year-old hat. I didn't just get down here by luck, For whatever reason that it came to pass that I was invited to come here, it's because of the 23 years that led up to this moment. Because right now all we have is today. But this hat and rabbit represents all the 23 years that I've been stinging people or teaching people how to sting themselves. Okay. So we all know the little nursery rhyme about Humpty Dumpty. Fell off a wall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Well, with bee venom therapy, we're putting people back together again. That's the goal. That's my goal, and I don't give up until I'm done helping them. So I never give up. That's the key. Never give up. The Dalai Lama says that all the time, and I listen. So maybe we should be saying, magician, heal thyself. We're actually harnessing the power of honeybees as medicine. Now, Voltaire said, the sign of a true physician is he entertains the patient while the body heals itself. Maybe it's kind of like when the doctor says, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, But I think Voltaire was on to something, because really the body is doing the healing. The body's healing itself. Bee stings may not be very entertaining. So I'm not sure that Voltaire would have liked to have been stung by bees or have his patient stung by bees, but the patient definitely won't be bored. And my goal is for you not to feel bored tonight either. I believe that all sickness is homesickness, and we're all Dorothys and Totos, and we're all trying to find our way home again. And our ruby red slippers are our bees. If we get diagnosed with MS, Lyme, cancer, or AIDS today, we want to go back to yesterday. When all my troubles seem so far away, the Beatles song, I believe in yesterday. Hey, but if we win the lottery today, we don't want to go back to yesterday because we just won the lottery today. We might not win it if we try again. So, so if you win the lottery, if something's really good happening, you don't feel a need to go back to yesterday. But if you're not feeling well, or if you get some really bad news, you want to go back in time before the bad thing happened. And so you can find a way to undo it or, to get well. Another part of the magic trick is that aerodynamically bees are too heavy to fly. And yet they do, because they don't know they're too heavy to fly, right? Nobody told them. So over the centuries and millennium, they flap their wings 11,400 times a minute to defy gravity. The life force and energy within that bee and all her products is like a life force transplant. So instead of getting a liver transplant, kidney transplant, heart transplant, when you have any of the bee products, and I think especially the bee venom is like bringing out the big guns. That's like the most powerful of all of them, although they all have their place in space and time. But this is really vibrational medicine because we're participating in an activity where the bee defied gravity, which is not an easy thing to do on this planet. This is really sacred medicine, where the bee is the doctor. There's no laboratory involved. You could even say maybe that God is the doctor, right? Because God made the bees. Bee venom therapy is often dismissed as anecdotal evidence, but all new medicine starts with anecdotal evidence. BVT, or bee venom therapy, may not be approved by the FDA yet. Okay, I'm going to add the yet. But it's approved by the GOD, and that's good enough for me. And I'm willing to say this on camera. I am prepared to go to jail if it comes to that, because I really believe in this work. And I promised my mentor, Charlie Maraz, that I would continue his legacy. Now, when it comes to double-blind studies and, whether it's anecdotal or whether it's you get stung on purpose, the truth is that absence of proof is not proof of absence. It's a famous quote. But so it doesn't really matter to me. Okay, it might matter to you, but it doesn't matter to me if I have a scientific research paper, because I've treated 60,000 patients and I've seen everybody get well if they followed the protocol. So, and I've never seen bee venom fail for any ailment, whether it's arthritis, chronic pain, MS, lupus, Lyme, anything. I've actually myself survived Lyme twice with 2 tick bites, okay? And I'm fully recovered, and I just recently been tested, and I definitely do not have Lyme or any of the co-infections. People ask, did you do anything else besides bee venom therapy? Yeah, vitamin C, which is mandatory, and that's why we have some packets of vitamin C over on the table, because if anybody's coming tomorrow, you need to be taking some vitamin C tonight and tomorrow morning, okay? So you need 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C, and I happen to be taking something else that was at the time also not approved, by the FDA, and it was called stevia. Stevia is a sweetener. It comes from an herb from South America, and at that time it was not approved by the FDA. It is now, and you can get it in any health food store and any supermarket pretty much. But at that time, so I was doing two things that were not approved, and the vitamin C, the bee venom therapy, vitamin C, and stevia. But stevia I was just doing because I liked the taste. I wasn't doing it because I knew that it burst through the biofilms for Lyme disease. But when I first started stinging, remember, I didn't have Lyme disease. I'd been in a car accident, so I had chronic pain, and I had that bladder infection, which disappeared with my first 3 bee stings. Okay, so now I believe that the bee sting was really the first acupuncture needle, and that bee venom therapy, or you could call it living acupuncture, where the needle is still alive, right? It's an attempt to recreate the original form of acupuncture. What we're doing now is modern acupuncture with needles and moxibustion and cupping and all those things. We're trying to get back to the bee stings. That's how I feel. I've never seen it written up anywhere, but I felt it from the moment I first heard about this. So, going back historically, bee stings for pain, or bee venom therapy, bee acupuncture, was done in China for 3,000 to 5,000 years. It was discussed, all the bee products, apitherapy, which would include all the products of the honeybee, was discussed in the Bible and the Quran, and even Hippocrates, the father of medicine in the West, talked about all the products of the honeybee. Even some of the mummies from the tombs in Egypt had actually pollen still in their stomachs when they did autopsies. So, they knew what they were doing back then. It's just like we have to catch up with yesterday in a different way. You've probably all heard of Charlemagne and Ivan the Terrible, like ruthless dictators and things. They used bee stings for their gout. Literally, they stung their big toes. So this is an ancient folk remedy for mostly arthritis and pain. I've had patients crawl into my house and walk out. I've had patients who were blind who can now see. I've had patients who were in wheelchairs who can now walk. So, what gets better than that, right? This is Al's story. This is an amazing story. And the reason it's going to have meaning for you, or at least one of the reasons, is that I was giving a speech just like this on a Friday night in New York State at a Beekeepers club, at a bee club. And they did a little treasury report first and had a little business meeting. And I thought, oh gosh, I won't have enough time to finish my speech. I'll have to rush. And I got started, and I noticed that there were some people in the audience. They were rolling their eyes. They were shaking their heads. I could tell they really did not believe a word I said, and they thought I was crazy. At least that's how I felt. And I was giving a speech. Well, I felt like I was probably being judged, It's not the end of the world, but, I had a mission. I had something to say, and I was going to say it. And then an older couple at that time, to me, what was an older couple is probably me right now. But so this couple came in, and they were late. And of course, nobody was sitting in the front row, right? So they sat in the front row. And I was doing my speech, and it was not a Q&A section. It was not a time for questions and answers. It was just time for me to be giving my speech like I'm doing now. And they kept raising their hand, and they kept asking questions and making comments, and I thought, I'm never going to finish my speech. And I thought about whether to tell this story because it does take up time in my speech. But I talked to my husband, and he said it was so important that even if I don't finish my speech tonight, what I've written here, that this story says it all, really. Al's story. So I finally decided to just let it go and not worry about finishing my speech. And it seemed that Al had some kind of an urgency to share his story. And I said, you know what, Al, why don't you tell your story? Boy, I was in for shock. He said, 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a very severe colon cancer, very rare, close, very low down by the rectum, and inoperable. They gave me 3 weeks to live, and they sent me home to die. And he said, I went to my hive, and I put my hand into my own hive, into the entrance of the hive, and let the bees sting me. He said, what have I got to lose? You know, I've only got 3 weeks to live. I may as well live it up, you know, get high on bee venom. So what he didn't realize was the index finger, notice I'm just using this finger, no other finger, that I don't know if it's going to be in the video, but my index finger is where the colon pathway starts in Chinese medicine. Now, I really don't know if he had put his foot at the entrance to the hive, or if he had just let himself get stung all over his whole body, if he would have had the same results. But he focused on his hand, and the index finger is part of his hand, and, well, 3 months went by, 6 months went by. He went back to the doctor. They did all the CAT scans, MRIs, whatever. It was totally gone. I mean, I don't know how quickly it went away because he wanted to give it a little time, but, you know, he might have been able to go back in 1 month. We'll never know. That was 10 years ago, and he is still alive. Yeah. So I just got the chills because I'm thinking about him. And the bottom line was, it seemed almost too good to be true, right? And because cancer is something, you know, the doctors send you home to die. They can't do anything for you if it's too late. But it wasn't too late because he'd never tried the bees. I mean, I'm not saying he never got stung, but he maybe never got stung on his index finger. And he never combined it with the acupuncture points. So it almost seemed like by the end of the evening that night, I remember it was actually in the fall because the president of the bee club was making gingerbread cookies in the oven, and that's what we had for our treat after the meeting. And it almost seemed like I paid Al to come there and give this little secret speech that we both knew wasn't really true, you know, just to, you know, rev things up and all. But of course I would never do that. But it was like so good to be true. It seemed like he was a plant, like I had planted him there. But what I did was then every speech I gave after that, where he lived nearby, I mean, he doesn't live down here, but he lives like in Pennsylvania, but every speech I gave, I brought him there because he had a story to tell, and his story was more important than mine, you know, because it really happened to him. And what I felt was that maybe that the beekeepers at the meeting who had been rolling their eyes back were willing to listen to another beekeeper, whereas I'm not really a really good beekeeper. I'm somebody who takes the bees and heals people, you know, helps the body heal itself. But my specialty is not beekeeping. My specialty is stinging people with honeybees, you know. But they listened to him, And by the end, I think even some of the ones that really were skeptical became quite fascinated. Okay, so we're going to continue with anecdotal evidence, and all medicine starts with anecdotal evidence because it's all old wives' tales, things your grandmother told you, things that her grandmother told her, and on, back through the centuries, passed down. But here's a story that you probably haven't heard. It's a story about a doctor and a witch. Dr. Withering, in the 1700s in England, had heard about a witch who lived in the forest. He was treating a lot of patients with what was called at that time dropsy. Dropsy was the name they used for an illness where people were dropping like flies. That's how they got the name dropsy. So Dr. Withering went to see the witch, and she had a cauldron, and she had patients sitting around in a circle, and she had this brew or tea, soup that she was making with herbs. And one of the herbs was foxglove. Now, foxglove is a poison, you're going to say, right? You have to be careful of foxglove. It's a poison, just like bee venom is a poison, right? It's a matter of dosage. Just like Coumadin. People use Coumadin to thin their blood. Coumadin is a rat poison. When it's in large amounts, it kills rats. So it's a matter of dosage. So anyway, Dr. Withering went back to London, and he got some of that foxglove, and he made a potion, and all his dropsy patients got well. And he was almost disbarred by the other doctors in London. Now, everything has the possibility of turning into its opposite. So what's the opposite of almost being disbarred? It's becoming famous for discovering or patenting or sharing digitalis, because that's what digitalis is made of. It's foxglove, just like Coumadin is a rat poison. So now I'm going to go, I'm going to try switching hands, and this might be a little noisy, so I'm letting you know for the video. I have a brown paper bag here, and inside is something's hiding in here, okay? So there's something in this bag that can be bought at any supermarket, even maybe drugstores sell it. But it's food. It's a food. And we all know what it does. I'm not telling you yet, but I'm just letting you know in advance that we're all familiar with it. We probably all had it, tried it at some point in our lifetime. Probably heard about it from our grandmother or our mother. But if I took what's in this bag, and if I actually made it into a potion, or chopped it up, put it into a capsule, put those capsules into a jar, and put a label on it, doing the very thing we know it does, I could be arrested and I could go to jail. Why? No double-blind studies, and not approved by the FDA to be sold with that title, at least by me. I mean, maybe somebody else could patent it or something and go through the whole process. But anyway, does anybody have any idea what it might be?
Ginger.
Ginger? That's a good one. Poppy seeds? Okay, it's a little bit bigger. I'm trying not to make noise with the bag. Is it okay if I make some noise? Okay.
Just put the mic down, Amber.
Oh, okay. I'll put the mic down for a second. Prunes. Prunes. It looks like it's in a raisin box, but those were red in the old days. You know, when I was a kid, prunes came in a rectangular box. This to me is almost like a jar. But I sent my husband to get some prunes, and this is what he came back with. But if I actually chopped up these prunes and put them into a capsule and put them into a jar and went to a flea market and just wrote the word laxative on it, I could go to jail, literally. So, another example of anecdotal evidence. Okay. Arthritis and dampness. People who have arthritis know when it's going to rain. It's not just because they look up at the sky. They feel it in their bones. You know it's going to rain. Christopher Columbus, there's a book and a song called They All Laughed at Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus had crippling arthritis. Many people don't know this, whatever you think of him, but he sat on his ship in a rocking chair. I don't think they had wheelchairs too much back then, but he was sitting in his rocking chair looking out at the sea. At one point, he was near the island of Santo Domingo, and he warned the government there, the people in charge, that there was a big storm coming and they should bring all their ships in to like a cove or something to protect them. They all laughed at Christopher Columbus. And there was a big storm, and 29 ships sank off the coast, 500 sailors drowned, and millions of gold doubloons are still sitting at the bottom of the sea off the coast of Santo Domingo. So I don't think you really need double-blind studies on arthritis and dampness or rain. And it's not, I know people I hear stories, people come to Florida because they want to get out of the cold, but if it's damp and you get a lot of rain, you're still going to notice your arthritis. Part of the problem about not having double-blind studies and not having FDA approval is it's hard to get it. You need millions of dollars to bring a new drug to market. So let's say, for example, you want to bring bee venom injections to market. You want to be able, if you're a doctor and you want to be able to inject people with bee venom, okay? The problem that I have with injections is that injections are very dilute and they have preservatives and they're not as good as the live bees. It's like Coca-Cola. It's like, not that I drink it, but it's the real thing. You want to drink, you want to have the real thing, which is the live honeybees. So the FDA does not accept approval of the FDA in other countries. So I'm going to give you an example. In Korea, the FDA has approved bee venom injections for chronic pain and arthritis. And a friend of mine made this happen, a medical doctor. I'm not going to mention him, but he has a huge clinic in Korea, and that's all he does all day long, is he injects people with this dilute bee venom, and people have to keep coming back because it's so dilute that it really doesn't really do the trick. So I had dinner with this doctor about 5 years ago, I think it was, and he's the only one now doing it's not really double blind, but he's doing a research project. He's trying to get FDA approval for those same injections, but for MS patients in America. It's costing millions of dollars. He's getting donors, and it's a long process. It takes like 10, 15 years. So I said to him at dinner, why in the world are you coming to America when you were born in Korea, you live in Korea, you have this huge practice there, you're helping a lot of people. Why are you coming to America to get approval for the American FDA? And what I expected to hear was that I made an assumption, okay? I expected to hear, because I really want to help people with MS in America. I don't really think that the injections really would do that, but assuming they did, that was the answer I thought he would give. And what he said was, I want to win the Nobel Prize. And then I thought, now I remember why I don't feel that close to him. We have such a totally different mindset. I already feel like I won the Nobel Prize. When somebody you've worked with who was blind can now see, it's like inside yourself you feel like a miracle happened. You don't need, I don't feel like I need a lot of recognition. You know, I just want to help people. I just want to keep helping people till my last breath. There actually are some studies on arthritis, not with humans, but with dogs. In the 1970s, the Arthritis Foundation gave $250,000 to Lieutenant Colonel Dr. James Vick, V-I-C-K. And he worked at Walter Reed Army Hospital near Washington, D.C. And he was able to get some dogs that had arthritis basically at the same level where they really couldn't function and they were just kind of sitting around and not moving. And he used bee venom injections, but not the injections from Korea, the ones that my mentor made, Charlie Mraz. He was making bee venom injections, and he was actually doing his own little studies with mice and things like that on cancer patients, mice that had been injected with cancer cells. And so what happened was that my mentor, Charlie Mraz, gave some venom to Dr. Vick, and he used it on these dogs. And as soon as the money ran out, the tests ran out. But it was, many papers were written. So if you are into looking on the internet and you Google Dr. James, Vick, and arthritic dogs or something like that, it will come up. And it was very impressive. I mean, he did a lot of good work, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle. Let's go back to the basics of, how does bee venom work and what kind of things does it work for? Anything that responds to cortisone, prednisone, steroids is probably going to respond to bee venom therapy. But how does it actually really work, I mean, it's like you're believing me. I think, you probably think I'm telling the truth, that I have no reason really to sit here and lie. I could take a vacation in Florida instead, there's no point in sitting up here and lying. But what bee venom does, it's a poison, just like foxglove and Coumadin. But how does that poison really work in the human body? Not just with dogs. And I've also worked on horses too. But with human beings, I mean, what are you really doing? Well, you're creating an emergency situation. And I don't really mean anaphylactic shock, but just because bee venom is a poison, it's acute. It's an acute situation where the body has to respond. And so it's an emergency. But it's really a wake-up call to the body. And the body has to break down the bee venom. Chronic conditions need to be elevated to an acute level. So when you get stung by a honeybee, anything that's chronic gets raised up to an acute level. So first the body has to break down that bee venom, and as an afterthought, it cleans up everything else that's going on. Okay? So in homeopathy, the father of homeopathy, his name was Dr. Hahnemann, he said, although I don't like the word cure, I usually don't use it, but he used this word, and he said, you can't cure anything that's chronic. You have to make it acute. So what you're doing with a bee sting is you're changing a chronic condition where the immune system's gone to sleep, and you're raising it up to an acute level, and that's really a key philosophy in bee venom therapy. So the body needs to break down this bee venom, right? Because it's got a lot of not only poisons, but foreign proteins. So you don't really know, like, how am I going to break down these, proteins? So the body has to mobilize, so it's sort of like an enemy, a terrorist. It's something that's coming into the body, and the body doesn't like it, and the body wants to take care of it. And so there are only two ways that the body can break down bee venom. The first way is sending heat to the area where you got stung. That's why people get red. That's where the redness comes from. And Hippocrates said, "Give me a fever and I can cure any illness." So we're creating a little fever when we purposely sting someone with a bee. We're creating a little fever there. The other way that the body can break down the bee venom is with dilution, meaning you need to dilute the bee venom. So if somebody's taken poison, if they can't, use an emetic and get the poison up, you try to flush it out with a lot of fluids. And so people wonder why, well, I got stung on my wrist, but my whole arm is swollen. And they think that's a bee, they're allergic to bees. That's not a true allergy. That's a good immune system, But they think because they were stung on the wrist and all the swelling and redness goes all the way up to their, armpit or something, that it's an allergic reaction. So I have to spend a lot of time teaching people. Obviously with beekeepers, I don't have to teach you that. But, with most of the people I work with, I have to, they think they're allergic, to bee venom, and they're really not. So a bee sting is like a computer, in a sense. It's the cursor part of the computer. So those of you who use computers or cell phones or whatever, you actually put your finger on a mouse or on a keypad or something, and you bring, if you want to type something, you bring your cursor to a certain part on the computer and you start typing there, or you post a picture. Well, if you sting somebody for tennis elbow, let's say, okay, and you put the sting, right near their tennis elbow, you're being very specific. You're stinging where it hurts. But it happens that there's an acupuncture point that's good for tennis elbow, and it's actually in that same spot, right where people tend to, I don't play tennis, but where you have tennis elbow. So if you sting somebody with a bee for tennis elbow, the body goes there and breaks down the bee venom, so it gets red, it swells, maybe itches, and it's an afterthought. The body heals the tennis elbow. That's why I said it's like a magic trick, because we're, in a sense, playing doctor, so to speak, with the bees. We're letting the bees be the medicine, and we're stinging, in that case, if it's just tennis elbow, we're stinging where it hurts, okay? I mean, with beekeepers, I'm not too worried about stinging an elbow for tennis elbow if you guys have been stung a lot. But if I'm working with someone who's never gotten stung by a bee, I don't start on the elbow, even if they have tennis elbow. I start, on the back, because that gives the body a chance for the bee venom to spread out. So while all this is going on, the heat, the dilution, the new blood coming back to the area after the byproducts are taken away when the bee venom is broken down, the body starts itching, and people can't stand the itch, and some people give up. So that's why if you do it on the back, they can't really scratch themselves that much unless they have a back scratcher or something. But I had a bladder infection, so you can maybe guess where I might have had my stings, kind of in a hairy area. I had to wear gloves at night because you can scratch yourself at night if you are itching, if you have poison ivy or something. So I had to wear gloves for the first little while. But bee venom, what it also does, at the very beginning, the bee venom actually stimulates the adrenal glands to regulate cortisol. We used to say that bee venom affects the adrenals by making cortisol. But the bottom line is a lot of people have too much cortisol in their system, and the bee venom still works. So we figured it out. The medical doctors that I was working with 23 years ago, we figured out it's not just, increasing the cortisol production, but it's regulating it, so if it's too high, it brings it down. But in order for the adrenal glands to work with cortisol, to make it or deal with it in any way, you need vitamin C. It's one of the raw ingredients. It's like trying to make bread, a kind of bread that rises without using any kind of yeast product or something that makes bread rise. So, you certainly don't want to be doing bee sting therapy or bee venom therapy on somebody without vitamin C. So we have plenty of vitamin C over there in case somebody thinks they want to come tomorrow to my workshop and they might want to be a demonstration. You can't really be a demo if you haven't had your vitamin C. So ideally it would be best to have 1,000 tonight and 1,000 tomorrow morning, before you come, and also to have a pretty good breakfast, because I don't like to sting people on an empty stomach, and usually protein is if you have just a lot of fruit, kind of goes through you pretty fast. So some people have fainted, nobody that I've stung, but I've heard stories where people have fainted because they just, stung on an empty stomach. So, bee venom therapy, there are lots of protocols out there. There are a lot of people that say, this is my protocol, you stole my protocol, this or that. But the bottom line is that this isn't my protocol. I just learned as I went along, and I was taught by Charlie Mraz. So if anybody, he was doing it for 60 years, and he kept bee venom therapy alive after Dr. Bodog Beck died, in the 1940s. So Charlie Mraz taught me everything he knew, and then I added the acupuncture piece, and then when I got Lyme, I added the detox portion of it on the non-sting days, because we don't sting every day, because that would really burn out your organs if you sting every day. And if you are doing like 30 stings a day, if it happens accidentally, when you're trying to catch a swarm or something like that, that's totally different than on purpose doing 30 stings, especially like on a first visit, especially with Lyme patients. I've heard stories, horror stories, where a patient was stung 30 bee stings, first visit, no testing, because I always test to make sure they're not allergic, and they end up in the hospital with sepsis and almost die. So, that's really bad for the bee venom therapy community to have people not do well, with treatments. So it's very important to have rules. There are medicines, Western medicine has rules too. Like, for example, if you're taking Lipitor or some kind of statin drug, you're not supposed to have grapefruit, So there's certain rules. So in bee venom therapy, there's a packet over there. You don't have to buy any books, okay? All you have to do is just pick up a free packet, and it's my protocol. It's the one I'm using for Lyme right now, but it can be tweaked and used for any autoimmune illness. But everybody's going to go home with it, assuming we have enough, and if not, maybe we can get some extra copies and hand them out. You guys can hand them out next time. But there are 12 cardinal rules in it, so it's kind of like a 12-step program. It's like you have to do the vitamin C. Anybody who's had alcohol tonight, okay, before they got here, if they had a beer or something, or some wine, a wine cooler, and you want to come tomorrow morning to get stung, I will not sting you. I will not do a demonstration on somebody who's had... That rules you out, huh?
No, not yet.
Okay. Okay. For later then. Yeah. So if you want to be, if you want to be a demonstration. If you want to get a bee sting tomorrow on purpose and be a model, patient for us, you can't have any alcohol tonight or for breakfast. And you have to have vitamin C, you know. And I have to say, I have never used an EpiPen. And I've stung over 60,000 people. That's a lot of people in 23 years. And normally, when I'm close to home and giving the speech, I hold up a big plastic bag that you can see through with about 25 expired EpiPens, because I've never, ever used an EpiPen. A couple of times I used Benadryl because somebody developed hives, but there were reasons for it, like they forgot to take their vitamin C, or they hadn't been stung in 3 months, So when I first started out, I made a lot of mistakes, but I only made them once. That's a good thing. It's not really a mistake if you learn from it. And so that's why I say, please do not sting the head or your low back or your neck or your arms and legs and hands and feet within the first few months. I mean, accidental stings, they happen, okay? But I'm talking about people who are doing this as a medical treatment. I don't want to hear about anybody who is at this meeting who's going to go out and sting somebody 6 times on their head, okay? Or on somebody else's head. That's a recipe for disaster, because the head is one of the most dangerous places, especially with Lyme disease or any kind of chronic autoimmune disease. The body just can't handle it. And so you can't do the extremities early. You have to do the vitamin C. You have to eat a little protein before. So, there are these rules. Like if you're on a beta blocker, the EpiPen won't work. So it's like, it's not that you can't do bee venom therapy because you're on a beta blocker. It's just that if you happen to be, the 1% or whatever it is, the people, I've never met anyone myself who went into anaphylactic shock, but there are probably people out there who will go into anaphylactic shock. And, if they have a pacemaker or if they're on a heavy-duty beta blocker, the EpiPen's not going to work. Now, if they're on a low-dose beta blocker, then maybe a second EpiPen will work. But it's risky, So, I always ask, are you on a beta blocker? Can you ask your doctor, can you get off it? Can you switch to something else? So, okay, I've kind of lost my place in my speech, which always happens to me because I start talking I get ahead of myself. But basically, bee venom only lasts in the body for about 48 hours. So if for some reason, like if you have Lyme disease and you think you can just sting once a week or twice a week, those spirochetes are going to keep multiplying because the bee venom, the melatonin in the bee venom kills Lyme spirochetes. Okay, we know this. We have research on the table. If you really want to read a real research paper, but it wasn't done on Lyme patients. It was done just on Lyme spirochetes in a test tube in 1997. But so we know that the melatonin in bee venom kills Lyme spirochetes, and then you have a die-off. Like any pathogen that you kill in a body, you have a die-off, so you don't feel very well. And in Lyme disease, it's called herxing, or it's a Herxheimer reaction. But also with things like candida, or things where you're actually killing something, in a pathogen in the body, a parasite, or something where you're actually killing it, and you have die-off. You're not just waking up the immune system, but you're actually killing a pathogen, which is really different than if you have chronic back pain because you work at Home Depot and you're lifting hives all the time. it's a very different animal, so to speak. So you have to know what you're dealing with. So so the bee venom only lasts 48 hours. That's why we recommend that you sting 3 times a week. And I always used to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because that's what I learned. You know, when I first started, that's how I learned. That's when that free clinic was only open on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's what I started doing. And then when people hear about, 2 weeks later, I was doing my own free clinic because the person who first was my first teacher, the one who the article was written about, she was burning out because too many people were coming to her house. And by the second time I was there, Connie Chung was there, Peter Jennings, CNN. It was like all the major media outlets were there because it was in the Washington Post. So I was the only one there with some kind of a license. And it was my second day of getting bee stings. And I was the one that they interviewed. So like there are all these, old CNN tapes and Connie Chung and, all these. I was on Animal Planet and, I've been on all these television stations, and I was in National Geographic, and I mean, those were a really exciting time. That's when I felt like I was really famous. Now it's kind of like, it's like people just sort of hear about me and invite me to speak. But it's like, it's not about being famous or being a star. It's about just helping people. So you need to know what kind of illness you're working with. So when I first started, I was working with MS because the woman who was my first teacher had MS, and all the people going there had MS. And so when she sort of started burning out because it was like Lourdes, everybody was coming there, 2 weeks later, she says to me, "Can you sting people at your house?" Now, I did not have a handicapped ramp. I did not have bees. I was not a beekeeper at that point. I did not have tweezers. I didn't have anything I needed except go to the health food store and get vitamin C. Within 2 weeks, I looked up to the heavens and asked for another sign. Within 2 weeks, somebody donated the wood for the ramp. Somebody built the ramp. Somebody donated $200 to get an observation hive in my dining room. Somebody, the man who gave me my first sting, gave me 8 tweezers. That's how I started off. And so I basically only had 2 weeks experience, and then I was on my own. So I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. That's why I have a protocol so that you might make mistakes, but you won't make the ones that I made because, I'm giving you the heads up. So you also don't want to swab the skin with alcohol. We talked about alcohol before. Swabbing the skin with alcohol is even, potentially worse than actually drinking it, although you could go into anaphylactic shock if you drink it, but too close to the stings. But if you actually swab the area you think that you're doing something good by your sterilizing your skin, right? With alcohol, first of all, it takes 20 minutes for the alcohol to really make it sterile. If anybody hears a nurse or a doctor, that it takes a while. You have to, it doesn't work right away. And so it will negate the venom because alcohol and bee venom they don't mix. Okay, so what we're really talking about is the fact that bee venom doesn't cure anything. It helps the body heal itself, and the body gets involved in its own healing process. And this is really magic, or you could call it alchemy. I like to call it alchemy because I always thought of myself as an alchemist. Ever since I was little, I wanted to turn lead into gold, And I'll tell you at the very end of my talk, let's see, oh gosh, I don't have much time left. I'm going to tell you the story about the pearl of great price, which is the story about alchemy. But what we're doing is we're making a medicine out of the illness itself. Now, how do you know where to sting? You know, that's the question that everybody always asks me. First of all, it's an art. It's not a science. Okay? Some people believe it's systemic and where you sting. But my mentor, Charlie Moraz, had thousands of stings, but his knee pain had never gone away, no matter how many stings he had. He had rheumatic fever when he was 28 years old. And he had to literally one day take a bee and sting his knee on the very spot where it was most painful for him. And the next morning he woke up and all the pain was gone and it never came back. That's an example of one bee sting did it all. Now he continued to sting in other places only because he was stung accidentally when he was doing his beekeeping, you know, but he actually never had to sting himself again for anything, and especially not that knee, and he was ready to cut off his leg. It was that bad. So he would say, oh, sting where it hurts, you know, that was kind of his motto. Trigger points, you know, hot spots. He also had another motto, which was sting the nerve meridians. Well, what does he know about nerve meridians? He's not a doctor, and the word meridians to me goes with Chinese medicine, so unless he's like a reincarnated acupuncturist or something, how would he know about meridians? So the nerves, if you look at Gray's Anatomy or you know anything about the body, the nerves come out of the spinal cord. So if you sting near the spine, and if you look at a spine chart, you know, if you join my Facebook group or if you go online, pick up my card, I have a website, and the Lyme website has a spine chart on it. And you can see exactly where all the nerves go. So if you want to work on your liver, you sting the nerves that go to the liver. If you want to work on your stomach, you know, if you have issues there. So, I mean, those are two possible places you could sting. The nerve meridians and where it hurts. Then acupuncture pathways and points, which is where I come in, and I have a workbook over there, but also you can buy it on Amazon. And the workbook on Amazon, the original Lyme book is not on Amazon anymore. It's actually sold out, and so I had to go to Staples and make my own copies. So, but so, I mean, and also you know, if you're familiar with the internet, you can take a book out from the library on Chinese medicine, and you could see where all the acupuncture pathways are. Another important point is stinging scars. Scars block energy. If you guys have scars, if women have C-section scars, if you had some kind of a heart ailment and you have a big scar on your chest, or you had back surgery, or you had your gallbladder taken out in the time when they didn't do it, you know, with a small scar. They did huge scars. If you got huge scars and adhesions, it's going to be very hard to get well. So you have to sting on the scar and around the scar. Okay. If you start stinging yourself for a while, and it feels like nothing's happening, like, quote, I'm not getting well. I'm not noticing any kind of change. Okay? Guess what? The bee venom goes where it's needed most. So if you just have tennis elbow and you stung over there 3 or 4 times and you still have tennis elbow, maybe you had something that was a little more serious, and the bee venom is going to fix that first, and then it's going to go to the tennis elbow. You know, it's definitely not, you know, going to do tennis elbow, you know, before some kind of cancer issue or some kind of, you know, autoimmune disease that you maybe don't even know you have. You know, so bee venom goes where it's needed most. That's why it's like the ride in Disney World. It's like the doctor. It sees what's going on the inside. Okay, so we're not going to rush with our bee stings. We're going to go very slowly. My group, we call it the turtle group. We're just like the turtle. We're not the hare. You know, we're not racing. This is not a race. This is not, you know, we're not rushing. It's like, you know that expression, like sometimes more isn't better? You know, sometimes less is more. Well, in this case, sometimes less is more. So you want to start, let's say, with 2 stings 3 times a week, 4 stings 3 times a week, 6 stings 3 times a week. And if that's too much, you could just go up by once. And if that's too much, you stay at 1 sting for a month or 2. You know, it's not a race. You're not pushing the river. You know, it's like that rabbit and the hat I showed you. It's not like you're gonna, you know, it's rare that somebody gets 1 sting and they're cured or they're healed. You know, that is very rare. That's the exception to the rule. Most of the time, especially with Lyme disease, you've got a lot of spirochetes. The longer you have it, the more spirochetes you have, the more they hide out, and you have to trick them and get them out of hiding. So remember again, no extremities at the beginning. As most of you probably know, there are 4 major reactions to a bee sting, and there's only one that's a real emergency. That's a real allergic reaction, and that's anaphylactic shock. So probably all of you have EpiPens. If you're beekeepers, I would think you would have EpiPens, and you want an unexpired EpiPen, so because they expire every year or 2, and if you happen to get one from the drugstore that only has 6 months left, that's not, you can ask them for a different one, because that one's only going to last you for a short time. So I also use children's liquid Benadryl because it doesn't have alcohol. So if somebody, for some reason, starts to go into hives, they can breathe, there's no problem with breathing, their tongue is not swelling, their throat is not closing up, but they get hives. Usually, it's because they don't have enough vitamin C in their system to make the cortisol or to regulate the cortisol. But so I use liquid Benadryl, and I think I've used it maybe twice. And it was for reasons that I would never do now. It was somebody was maybe gone for 10 days, and I didn't do a testing on the person. Well, that only happened once. You know, I ended up sitting in the bathroom with her. I sat on the floor while she was on the toilet, you know, because she didn't feel well. Because what happens is, let's say you've been stinging and you've been doing really well with your stings and you go on vacation for 2 weeks. You come back and you're going to pick up where you left off with a bee sting. Your body remembers where you were in the process, and it's going to continue from that place. So that's why you need to start with a test sting. But I didn't know that, so I just went ahead and gave her the regular number of stings that I normally did. But after 1 or 2 stings, her ears started itching, her scalp started itching, her palms and her feet got red, and she said she needed to use the ladies' room. Well, I wasn't going to leave her alone in the ladies' room, so I sat on the floor. So fortunately it was a woman, and she was comfortable enough with me. But what happened was, what I didn't know was right before she left to go on a trip for 2 weeks, she started going into her healing crisis, which is that flu-like sensation, which some people call herxing if they have Lyme. But anybody can get flu-like symptoms, you know? It's like you feel sort of nauseous, you have diarrhea, you know, you just don't feel well. And she started going into that the night before she left on her trip. So when she came back and got stung, she picked up exactly where she left off, and she went into the healing crisis right with me. And I was supposed to go sting a horse that afternoon, and I had to call and say, I'm sorry, I can't come. I can't leave my patient, you know? So anyway, that's when the liquid Benadryl, I never used an EpiPen with her. She didn't need it because her throat wasn't closing up. But, you know, we used some Benadryl. But I learned from that point on, 7 days, that's it. On the 7th day, if someone's coming back from vacation, they get a test sting and 1 more real sting. and that is it. They cannot just go back and do the 10 they were doing before, or the 8 or the 4. You know, it's one of my rules, one of my 12-step rules, you know. Okay, so anaphylactic shock is really the only true allergy. That's an immediate systemic reaction. Then you get immediate local. Immediate local is it feels like a bee sting. Now that's immediate local. You guys feel it all the time. That's not an allergy. Okay, it's just an immediate response to the bee venom. Then you have a delayed systemic, which is like the flu-like symptoms, or herxing if you have Lyme, where you're killing something. And then you have delayed local, which is like you get stung on your arm and it gets really red and it swells and it itches, and that's a delayed, local reaction. And most people think that's an allergy. They think they're allergic to bees, and even people who go into anaphylactic shock, let's say as a child, maybe they were stung by a yellow jacket. But people think that every stinging insect is a bee. They just call it a bee. They don't really know the difference between honeybees and yellow jackets, And the venom is totally different, has different components, and it doesn't have the right components for Lyme. It doesn't have that melatonin. And I'll tell you now, if you Google the word melatonin, you'll come up with some studies. They're doing studies mostly in test tubes. They call it nanobees, and you probably have heard about it at Washington University in St. Louis. They take melatonin, they attach it to some other particle, and they inject it into a test tube that's filled with HIV cells. It kills the HIV cells. They haven't done it in a human being yet, but I've stung HIV patients, and I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I did my whole little research. I did a huge speech. I'd any day rather give a talk like this where I can actually see your faces. I actually spoke at Mondia when I was in Vancouver one year, and I spoke in front of 5,000 people. It was dark, it was in a huge auditorium, and it had almost no meaning to me because I couldn't see anybody's face. I couldn't see how people were reacting. But I presented my research, and it's in my book, Be in Balance. That's the only book that it's in. That speech and that research is in there. And it's basically from the late 90s. I'm going to just tell you about a few components that are in the bee venom, and then I'm going to come to kind of an end, because we're getting close. So the most important thing for MS is apimin, although it does help Lyme patients as well. Apimin is very small, one of the smallest components in bee venom, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And MS patients need that. MS patients, their myelin sheath has been attacked by the body, attacks the myelin sheath, and it disappears. And so then they can't walk. They're in a wheelchair because, the nerve doesn't get the signal from the brain to go down to the foot so you can walk. So apimin does not regenerate the myelin sheath, but it improves the conductivity of that person's nerves. And so they're able to leave their wheelchair behind. Melatonin and adolapin are powerful anti-inflammatories. They're 100 times more powerful than getting a cortisone shot. And as I said, melatonin kills Lyme spirochetes in minutes or even seconds. And if you want, you can pick up the research paper on the table. It's free. Melatonin is to a Lyme spirochete like kryptonite is to Superman. Kills it right on the spot. So that was a really important sense I wanted to make sure I got in. So you're going to make a medicine out of the illness. And if you think about it this way, all suffering is our suffering. As long as there's no, quote, cure or recovery for HIV/AIDS, Lyme, cancer, MS, all kinds of chronic ailments, autoimmune diseases. We all have these diseases because we're all one. We're all, really in a sense, we're like a beehive. We're individual people, but we live on one planet, and that's our hive. So really, we're like bees in a beehive. So we need to live each day as if our life really depended on it. We need to ask hard questions, even if we don't have the answers. And then, if we don't have those answers, we need to live the questions, because life is lived forwards and understood backwards. Think about it. Life is lived forwards, but we only understand it backwards, looking back on things. Yeah, hindsight, 2020 hindsight. So God's medicine is life, and all illness is sacred. So we must respect any illness that we have, any symptoms we have, and we must give it meaning. It's a medicine for the soul. Catherine of Siena, a saint, said, "All the way to heaven is heaven." Okay? If you scramble the word sacred, you get the word scared. So a lot of people are scared of bees, but they're also scared of their symptoms. So if they're scared enough of their symptoms, they will try the bees eventually. Sometimes they have to be in a wheelchair to try it, but they do try it. So symptoms are really just red flags and warning signs on our way home. And again, we look to see what's missing. We look for an opening. We kiss the boo-boo. You do your treatment with your words. It's not just the bees, And it's not just enough to treat the body. You have to treat the whole person. You have to really care about that person. Because if you don't care and you're just stinging them, that energy will come through that you're in a rush and you really don't care about them. One of my acupuncture teachers said to me, "Never put a needle in a patient until you've already done the treatment." That's really a profound statement. So I try to remember that. Before I was doing the bees, I used to say, well, I am the needle then. So I have to do the treatment. I have to have rapport with my patients before I actually put a needle in. So the same would be true with bees. You have to be the bee. You are the bee, okay? Just like I am the PowerPoint presentation tonight, because I don't have one, so I am the bee, I am the PowerPoint. And so the original meaning, I'm almost done, the original meaning of medicine is service, and all life is sacred. Medicine is a special form of love, and love is the greatest healer of all. Cicero wrote a long time ago about a temple on a mountaintop, and people came to be healed and to heal others. And in the central courtyard, there was a statue of Venus. Do you know Venus, the goddess of love, right? In the dictionary, the word for venom comes from Venus in Latin. So medicine is a special form of love, and especially bee venom, bee medicine, is a special form of love. So the word medicine comes from the word mead, which you all know is an elixir from honey, the first alcoholic beverage. So bees have a message for your life. They're the most altruistic creatures on the planet. They live in harmony and they give their lives, even in death, they're still giving. And they're the only species on the planet that doesn't destroy the environment. Bees have a message for your life, and your life is a message. Gandhi. So to end, I'll just explain that alchemy, if you have a pebble in your shoe right now, and you start walking out of here, it's really going to be irritating. So you're going to sit on the curb and you're going to take your shoe off and you're going to take the pebble out. But if you're an oyster down in the bottom of the sea, okay, and you have a grain of sand in you and you can't get it out, you're going to send a luster, you're going to send something over to that grain of sand, and you're going to cover it up because it's an irritant, okay? And it turns into a pearl. That's the story of the pearl of great price. So the very thing that's at the heart of your pain could be a blessing in disguise. Your pain is the seed of your greatest treasure. You need to befriend your symptoms. Years ago, I had a vision that I was a medicine woman, and I had a little tear glass bottle, and I saved all my tears from all the times that I cried, and I used my tears to heal other people who were crying. Bee venom is very clear, and I thought about it the other day. Bee venom is like the tears of the bee. I mean, in terms of it looking like a clear substance. Amber symbolizes the tears of the pine tree. Maple syrup is like a sap that comes from the maple tree. Well, what comes from a pine tree is called amber, but it's a resin. Starts off as sap, maybe turns into propolis or something. The oldest bee on the planet was found in amber. How did that happen? Well, a bee was probably sitting on a branch of a pine tree at one point, and it ended up, falling to the ground, and it got stuck in the amber, and over millions of years it was hardened, like a diamond is hardened from coal, under pressure. Over millions of years, the sap from a pine tree, those tears of that pine tree, turn into amber. One of the patron saints of beekeeping is Saint Ambrose. That's about as close as you can get to my name. Now, I wasn't born with this name. I chose this name. My maiden name was Rosen, so that was, I used to sing, so I just shortened it. But my first name was not Amber. But I chose it because I just loved the stone, and my mother wore a lot of amber. So I actually grew into my name. But another patron saint of beekeeping is Saint Valentine, and that's all about love too. So now you'll be happy to know that I'm just going to recite 2 lines from a poem, and I will conclude. I can take off my glasses now. Last night I dreamed, O marvelous one, that honeybees were in my heart, making honey out of my old failures. Thank you very much.